I would like to welcome everybody. I'm Miklós, Szövényi-Lux, Head of Strategic Relations of GRAPHISOFT on a worldwide level. But you don't have to be afraid. I'm not a commercial guy. I'm an architect by profession. So I will speak a little bit about the BIM standards that are emerging on a worldwide level. First, let's see a little bit an introduction about that. Why would you implement BIM in your office? Why is it important? Why is everybody speaking about this, that BIM is important? Well, it has very simple reasons. One of them, Vitek mentioned, it is this. So you become more productive. You have more workflow at the beginning, but when it comes to getting your drawings, the construction documentation, as you see under the blue curve, there is much less area, so you have to do less work. You are much more productive, and it's much easier to make the changes because you have only one database. So anything you change on any part of the building is automatically reflected in the others. For example, you change something in the plan, it's reflected in the elevations. You change something in the elevations, it's reflected in the list of materials. So the first thing is, again, it's an economic reason. You become much more productive. The second is, again, is that the ability to make changes in the early design phase on your table when you are in the office is much easier than when the construction is going on. And I always say if you have to make changes when the construction is on, it would cost a lot of beers for the architect, especially if you have to demolish something on the site. So the next one is that, okay, these are practically the two main reasons why someone would implement BIM in his office, in his everyday practice. There is a survey, what was made by the National British Standard Institute of Britain, that let's see that in how many countries do the users declare themselves who are in the AEC industry that they are BIM users. You can see that on the statistics that it's quite high in certain European countries where they made the statistics and they wanted to check what is the most, what is the biggest evidence that you are using BIM, that you are working, sending BIM files to other offices, so you are using the IFC files to be sent. Who knows, by the way, who knows? Put up your hands. Who knows what is IFC? Quite a lot. So IFC, for those who don't know it, it's a file format exchange, a neutral file format, in order to exchange in an intelligent way files between BIM applications. So to test that are they really using BIM, they made this other survey. This is the interesting part. And as you see here, you can see exactly that really this has something common. In those countries where they declare BIM, the usage of IFC, especially, why is it so high in Denmark? What do you think? Because most of the offices in Denmark, like in Poland and other parts of Europe, are small offices. These are not big offices, so they have to work in collaboration with other offices, so that's why they use IFC to exchange files between the offices. And let's see a little bit about now the standards. So why do we need standards? It's very interesting that you know that every standard is composed of three parts: the terminology, the process, and the digital storage, or the file format. So there are already standards in these industries. Why do you think that in the oil, the aerospace, and the defense? Of course, because if you have proper standards, you can save a lot of money. And finally, arrived for the built environment, for the AEC industry, also the standards. These standards are developed by each country. What do you think that how many nations have BIM standards in continental Europe? Who would say that 10? 15? 5? 2? You will be very surprised. It's only 2. Austria and the Netherlands. All the rest are just beginning, so Poland is not late here. Nobody is late. They're just beginning to think to have something which is a BIM standard. Now, if you look at worldwide, the picture is a little better. All the northern parts of Scandinavia and the UK, you see that these countries already have their standards. It's very powerful in the Far East. Japan, Korea, Singapore has the most advanced standards. And of course, in the Nordic countries, as you see, Finland, Norway, and of course, the UK. And here are the new ones, which are emerging, which are preparing now. The first is Russia, where President Putin said that for 2017, January, you must have it, full stop. You know, in January, the weather in Siberia is very cold, so they should be fast, very fast. Then there are other ones, like Mexico, where it became, the standards became for BIM applications before Christmas will become in law. Then there is Chile who is doing it, and of course Peru. And finally, since last year, the EU. As you see here, the first decision of the EU to adapt as common file format for the BIM standards in the EU was IFC, which was brought in in February this year. So let's see that who is the driver. You must know there is an organization called Building Smart, who is the driver of the standards. They are practically in charge of telling the different software vendors like us, like GRAPHISOFT, like Bentley, like Autodesk, that what are the standards that should be developed by each vendor in order to be compliant with the new AEC standards. Now, next, there is the data dictionary, the BIM collaboration format. All these things are suggested by Building Smart. Now, the next slide will frighten you a little bit. What does this mean that this BSD, the Building Smart Data Dictionary? This means practically this. Don't get frightened. This means that all the different parts of a window in all application when it appears must have the same terminology. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to send a window from a BIM application to a facility management system if the properties are not named the same way. That the window sill, for example, has to be named the same way and interpreted in all other applications. And of course, Building Smart is developing also the properties which are non-BIM. There is the I in BIM, which is information. There is a lot of information which is non-geometric of every 3D object, every architectural object or structure, which is also very important, the fire rating, the U value, all these things. And now you see that Building Smart had different chapters in countries. These are I will show you a summary of the BIM standards marked with the rectangles in these countries. So you can see here that also on the world map you saw this more or less. That on the first column you have, of course, the organization who is in charge of the BIM standards. The second, the name of the standard. And the third, more or less the description. Then when was the first step when they created it, and where are they now? And now I will speak about the most advanced, the most interesting for us, the US, the UK, Austria, and the EU. So the US, it's called National BIM Standard of the United States, MBIMS US. And why did they implement it? Of course, there you can see the reasons. More cost-effective, provide standards to facilitate efficiency for the whole life cycle of the building, and it is designed for software developers, implementers, designers, engineers, constructor owner, and operator. This is the most important part. And they created a national BIM standard for the United States, which describes these standards. And there is the LOD, which is called Level of Development, which has been defined by the American Institute of Architects, the CSI, and the BIM Forum. What does this mean? This means a degree of the model which defines not only the geometry and also the attached information. This is not just defined by design phases. I will explain a little bit more graphically what LOD means here. This means that, for example, you can show a column at different scales, the geometry such way, but there is also a description about how it is assembled. You see the LOD, the bigger number is, the more detailed it is shown, not only the geometry, but also the description. For a steel column, and you have the same for a reinforced concrete column. So these are the different LODs which are defined, used by the Americans. Now came the British, and they told, we have also NBS, which is National BIM Standards. And surprise, surprise, build it cheaper, build it quicker, build it green, sell it to the world, the same way as Vitex showed you before. So this is the main reason why the UK started the BIM standards. And here they are. As you see, they are on the level 2I, which means that practically all projects should be collaborative in BIM by the end of 2016. And then they venture into another part, which is the facility management, the building construction simulation, which is called 4D, 5D, and the building quantities, which is called 4D, 5D until 2025. Again, here they realized the plan of work, and here again, what did they do? That the vendors, Autodesk, Bentley, Graphisoft, Nemetschek, and Building Smart UK define the different libraries, common libraries for the standards all together. And these should be used in all projects in the UK. So this is basically the UK, and of course, they made something different than the Americans. They have level of detail, which is called LOD, which is, again, the detailness, but they separated it from the information. So in the UK, it's a little bit more complex. You have the LOD, which describes the geometry, but it's only the geometry. And you have the level of information, which is separate information, which describes the different scale of the projects at a different scale when it is going to be built. And then there is the only continental one, which is important for us, the Austrian BIM standards called ENORM. And again, it was the first BIM standard for Austria. It came, as you see, they had an old CAD standard, which was 2D. And then practically what they did is did a property server for the different properties, which is the I in BIM again, and a standard for building calculation. So as you see here, you see the level 2. They are also the level 2, and they're going for the level 3. And they are enhancing their property server in order to attach more and more information to the building model. This was done, the first step was done in 2015 May. And here you see again that here you have the different element classification according to the Austrian standards, that they classify according to different scales, the different parts of the building. Now, one more topic is here. What is the EU doing? So the EU, after a while they thought, and in 2014, they agreed that we must do something together. It wouldn't be nice, at that time there were 28 countries in the EU, now only 27 remain. So actually we should do something together. it's not worth to have a different BIM standard for every country, especially if the countries like in Europe are very near to each other. There is a continuous workflow between the countries. People having jobs, for example, I know that I come from Hungary, but it's the same situation in Poland. Many of you go to Scandinavia, you go to England for work. So even architects. So it would be nice to have some kind of common standards which is understandable by everyone. So it's not a problem if someone is walking around the EU and not finding the same standard. So what did they do? They formed a CEN-TC, that's the European Committee for Standardization. It's a technical committee in 2015 September, so it was not so far away. It was practically a year ago. And they made 4 work groups, and the first one is in charge of strategy and planning. The work group 2 is the information exchange data. There is where they define what would be the format of the new IFC format, what should it contain, or BCF, which is BIM collaboration format. The work group 3 is the information delivery manuals, so what should be delivered in a project when you are presenting the project. And the work group 4 are the data dictionaries, what I showed at the beginning, that how should we interpret each part of a building structure. What was the first very good decision of the EU, this committee? It was in Oslo this year, February, that they accepted from the ISO standard that IFC should be, industry foundation classes should be the common BIM standard for the whole EU for file exchange, which is a neutral format. It's not government or vendor dependent. It's completely neutral and open. The second was that they accepted what was voted in later in July this year is these 2 ISO standards. One is the information management using the concepts and principles and the delivery phase of the assets, which practically are the projects what we work on. These were also adapted, so we have now these 3 standards already there in the EU. Now, I wanted to just tell you a little bit, as we come from Hungary, that what's going on in the near neighborhood in Hungary. So in Hungary, it started very recently. MST is in charge of the BIM standards in Hungary. MST, if you translate it, is the Hungarian Standards Institution. And the BIM section was formed at the same time as of the EU practically a year ago in 2015, November. It's one year old now. And what they are doing now is adapting at the first stage all the standards what became a standard in the EU. So there is nothing new. Nobody's late nowhere, because these are the 3 standards I showed you just before, and these were just published a week ago in October 2016 by the EU also. So practically these are the first 3 standards within the European Union. So just to summarize, I would like to say that why are BIM standards important? Because the governments realized that on the projects, and not only the government projects, but also on the private projects, you can save money. And in your office, you become much more effective if you work the BIM way. And I would like to welcome everybody to the BIM journey. And this is the end of the presentation, so I will give over the word now to Antonio. Thank you very much for your attention.